The silence in my house was supposed to be a luxury, the first real break I had taken in 16 years, but 3 hours after I dropped my daughter off for her school trip. The phone rang. It was the new lawn guy, and his voice was shaking. He told me he was standing by the foundation vents and heard crying coming from beneath my floorboards. I laughed it off as a plumbing echo, but then he asked if I was sure I was alone. The diesel exhaust of the charter bus hung heavy in the cool morning air. A thick gray cloud that tasted of burnt oil and impending separation. I stood on the sidewalk outside Maple Hollow High, my hands tucked deep into the pockets of my cardigan, watching the line of teenagers shuffle toward the open luggage bays. They were a chaotic sea of hoodies, tangled earbuds, and oversized pillows, vibrating with the specific, high-frequency energy of 16-year-olds about to be unsupervised for 5 days. Lily turned back just before she stepped onto the metal stairs. She looked older than she had at breakfast. Maybe it was the way her hair was pulled back, or the serious set of her shoulders under her backpack straps. She gave me a wave. Small, distinct, not eager enough to be uncool, but not dismissed enough to be cruel. "I love you," I mouthed. She nodded. A quick jerk of her chin, and then she was gone, swallowed by the tinted windows and the loud, boisterous collective of the junior class. I stood there until the bus heaved a pneumatic sigh and pulled away, rumbling down Elm Street past the manicured oaks that gave our town its name. The silence that rushed in to fill the space where the engine noise had been felt physical. It was heavy. It pressed against my chest. For the last 10 years, my life had been calibrated to the rhythm of Lily, her wake-up times, her practice schedules, the hum of her television, the thud of her footsteps on the stairs. I was 33 years old, a mother who had started young and sprinted through adulthood to keep up, and this was the first time in recent memory that the calendar on my phone was blank. I walked back to my car, a sensible sedan that blended perfectly into the rows of other sensible vehicles in the school lot. The drive home was short. Maple Hollow was designed that way. It was a place of loops and cul-de-sacs, a labyrinth of safety where the speed limit was strictly 25 and the lawns were judged with the severity of a court-martial. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked different. It was a craftsman bungalow, built in the 20s, with a deep porch and eaves that usually felt protective. Today, without Lily's bike leaning against the railing or her running shoes kicked off by the mat, the house looked stoic. It looked indifferent to me. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The silence was immediate. It wasn't just the absence of noise, it was the presence of stillness. The refrigerator hummed, the floorboards settled with a dry crack. I dropped my keys in the bowl on the entry table, the sound jarringly loud, ringing out like a dropped coin in a church. I took a deep breath, trying to orient myself in my own home. That was when I smelled it. It was faint, a ghost of a scent drifting from the back of the hallway. Damp earth, not the sharp, chemical smell of mildew, but something older, heavier. It smelled like wet dirt and stagnant air. I followed it, my nose wrinkling. Down the hall toward the kitchen, it seemed strongest near the pantry door, which sat adjacent to the narrow door leading down to the basement. I paused, leaning in. There was a draft, too. A thin, cold ribbon of air curled around my ankles, seeping out from the gap beneath the basement door. I frowned. The basement was finished. Mostly. It was a laundry area and a storage space that we rarely used for anything other than switching loads of clothes or grabbing holiday decorations. We kept the thermostat down there steady. There shouldn't have been a draft that felt like it came from a cave. Old house, I told myself. It's just an old house settling into the autumn chill. I turned away, refusing to let the quiet spook me in the first hour. I went to the kitchen island where the morning mail sat in a neat stack. I flipped through it, needing the normalcy of bills and flyers, electric bill, a coupon for a car wash, a flyer for a pizza place, and then a heavy cardstock mailer in soothing blues and greens, Neighborhood Family Wellness. The header read in a soft, rounded font. Below it was the logo for a nonprofit I had seen signs for around town, but never really engaged with. Harborstone Outreach. The image on the front was generic but effective. A mother and child silhouetted against a sunrise, holding hands. The text on the back was less generic. We know that maintaining a home and a family in Maple Hollow comes with unique pressures. You don't have to carry the weight alone. Harborstone Outreach provides community support, discreet assistance, and crisis stabilization for families in transition. We are your neighbors. We are listening. It was the phrase, "we are listening," that made me pause. It felt odd. Not "we are here to help or call us," but "we are listening." It implied a proximity that felt invasive. I tapped the card against my palm. I was a single mother in a town that prided itself on two-parent, double-income stability. Maybe I was their target demographic. Maybe my demographic was just woman alone in a house. I tossed the mailer into the recycling bin, but the image of the silhouette stayed in my mind for a second longer than it should have. I spent the next few hours aggressively normalizing my environment. I made coffee I didn't really want. I wiped down counters that were already clean. I opened the windows to chase out the musty smell, blaming it on the rain we had 3 days ago. By 1 in the afternoon, I had almost convinced myself that the solitude was a gift. I could read. I could watch the terrible reality shows Lily made fun of. Then the phone rang. It wasn't a number I recognized, but the area code was local. I answered, expecting a telemarketer or the school nurse telling me Lily had forgotten her inhaler. "Hello? This is Alice." There was a pause on the other end, a shuffle of fabric, wind blowing across a microphone. "Hi, Ms. Henderson? This is Devin Pike, the lawn guy?" "Oh, right. Hi, Devin." Devin was new. My previous landscaper had retired to Florida, and Mrs. Gable next door had recommended Devin. She said he was young but thorough. He had been out there for an hour, trimming the hedges along the side of the house. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Did I forget to unlock the gate?" No. The gate is fine." His voice was tight, high-pitched. He sounded like he was standing on his toes. "I'm actually done with the trimming. I'm packing up the truck now. But I wanted to call you instead of knocking. I didn't want to freak you out." "Freak me out?" I felt a prickle of irritation. "What happened? Did you break a window?" "No, ma'am. Nothing like that." He took a breath. I could hear a car drive past him on the street. I was working on the west side of the house. You know, where the foundation vents are? Behind the hydrangeas? Yes, I know it. I was down there clearing out some of the dead leaves from the vent grates. And, look, this is going to sound crazy. I almost didn't say anything, but I have a little sister, you know? So I know what it sounds like. What sounds like? Devin? Crying. He said, the word dropped into the conversation like a stone. I gripped the phone tighter. "Excuse me?" I heard crying. "Ms. Henderson." Coming from the vent, from under the house. I stood perfectly still in the middle of my kitchen. The sunlight was streaming in through the window, bright and cheerful, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The contrast between the warm light and his words made my skin crawl. "Devin," I said, keeping my voice level. "I don't have a dog. My daughter is away on a school trip. The house is empty." "I know," he said. "That is why I'm calling." It wasn't a cat sound. It didn't sound like an animal. It was distinct. It sounded like someone was down there. It stopped when I got close to the screen, but I swear I heard it. I forced a laugh. It came out brittle. "Devin, honestly, it's probably the ductwork. When the wind hits the intake just right, it makes this moaning sound. It scares me half to death sometimes in the winter. Or it could be a raccoon. We have had issues with them getting into the crawl space before." There was a silence on the line. I could feel him wanting to believe me, wanting to take the easy out. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Yeah, probably. Wind or a raccoon. That makes sense." He didn't sound convinced. He sounded like a man who was deciding that his paycheck was worth more than an argument. I felt like I had to tell you," he said, "just in case. I appreciate it." I said, and I meant it. "Thank you for looking out. Devin, you can leave the invoice in the mailbox." "Okay. Have a good afternoon. Ms. Henderson. He hung up. I lowered the phone and looked at the black screen. Crying. I walked to the sink and looked out the window. I could see Devin's truck parked at the curb. I watched him walk around the back to secure his equipment. He paused before he got into the driver's seat. He looked back at my house. He didn't look at the front door. He looked down, toward the foundation line. His expression troubled. Then he got in and drove away. I stood there for a long time. It was ridiculous. It was the middle of the day. I was a rational woman with a mortgage and a master's degree. I was not going to be the woman who called the police because the wind blew through a vent. But the house felt different now. The silence wasn't just heavy. It was attentive. I walked to the basement door. I put my hand on the knob. The brass was cold. I opened it and flipped the switch. The light bulb at the bottom of the stairs flickered on, casting long, angular shadows across the concrete floor. "Hello?" I called out. My voice echoed slightly, bouncing off the washing machine and the stacks of plastic bins. "Hello?" Nothing. Just the hum of the sump pump in the corner. I went down the stairs, my steps deliberate. I walked the perimeter of the room. I checked behind the furnace. I looked up at the exposed joists. I went to the small, high window that looked out at ground level, the one near where Devin had been working. It was shut tight, painted over by the previous owners years ago. I stood under it and listened. I heard a car drive by. I heard the faint rustle of the hydrangeas against the siding. I did not hear crying. "See?" I whispered to myself. "Just the wind." I went back upstairs and locked the basement door. Then, for good measure, I locked the front door and the back door. I turned on the radio in the kitchen, filling the space with the chatter of a pop station. I told myself I was being safe. I told myself I was just settling in. But as the afternoon wore on and the sun began to dip below the tree line, dragging shadows across the living room floor, I couldn't shake the feeling of Devin's voice. I know what it sounds like. Night in Maple Hollow was usually comforting. It was a town of porch lights and motion sensors, a grid of illuminated safety. But tonight, the darkness felt absolute. I made a simple dinner, soup and toast, and ate it standing up at the counter. I didn't want to sit at the table alone. Every time the refrigerator cycled off, the silence rushed back in, aggressive and demanding. Around 9 o'clock, the noises started. Every house has a language. I had lived here for 6 years. I knew the language of this house. I knew the sharp crack the stairs made when the temperature dropped. I knew the rattle of the window in the guest room. But these noises were new. I was sitting in the living room, trying to focus on a book. When I heard a thump from the kitchen, it wasn't a settling noise. It sounded like something soft hitting the floor. My head snapped up. I waited. Silence. I stood up, my heart doing a traitorous double beat against my ribs. I walked into the kitchen. Nothing was out of place. The fruit bowl was still on the counter. The mail was still in the bin. Empty house paranoia. I thought, you are listening too hard. You are hearing your own blood in your ears. I turned back to the living room. Scritch. It came from the hallway, near the basement door. It sounded like fabric dragging against wood. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, turning on the flashlight feature. The beam cut through the dim hallway light, a stark white cone. I walked toward the basement door on tiptoe. I felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad movie, but I couldn't stop myself. I needed to see. The door was still locked. I checked the knob. Firm. I put my ear against the wood. I listened. For a long minute, there was nothing. Then, a faint vibration. Not a sound, exactly, but a pressure, like the air pressure in the basement had changed. I unlocked the door. My hand was shaking. Just a little. I hated that. I hated that a lawn guy's comment had reduced me to a trembling cliché. I opened the door. The darkness below was absolute. I shone my phone light down the stairs. The beam illuminated dust motes and the gray concrete floor. "I'm coming down," I said. My voice sounded thin. "If there is an animal down here, you better run." I walked down. 1 step, 2. The air was colder than it had been this afternoon. And that smell, the wet earth smell, was stronger. It was cloying now, thick in the back of my throat. I reached the bottom of the stairs. I swept the light around the room, the washing machine, the dryer, the shelves of holiday decor, the water heater. Everything was exactly as I had left it. I walked over to the corner where the sump pump pit was. Sometimes frogs got in there. I shone the light into the pit. Dark water. Silent. I went to the utility sink and turned on the tap. The pipes groaned, a loud metallic shudder that made me jump. Water splashed into the basin. I let it run for 10 seconds, creating noise, creating a baseline of normal sound. Then I shut it off. The silence slammed back into place. I waited, and then I heard it. It was faint, so faint that if I hadn't been straining, I would have missed it. It didn't sound like it was in the room with me. It sounded like it was coming through the wall, the north wall, the one that faced the backyard. It was a rhythmic, hitching sound. A sob. It lasted for 3 seconds, a pulse of pure misery vibrating through the concrete. Then it stopped. I stood there, frozen, the flashlight beam trembling against the cinder blocks. My brain scrambled for an explanation. Pipes, air pockets in the water line, a neighbor's TV. But the neighbor on that side was 70 yards away, and Pipes didn't gasp for breath. I backed away. I didn't turn my back on the wall. I backed up the stairs, one step at a time, keeping the light trained on that concrete expanse. When I reached the top, I slammed the door and locked the deadbolt. I backed down the hallway until I was in the kitchen. I dialed Marissa. Marissa Cole had been my best friend since orientation week at college. She was a realtor, a pragmatist, and the person I called when reality felt slippery. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, lady. Living it up in the empty nest? I think there is something under my house." I said. I didn't wait for a greeting. Marissa paused. I could hear wine being poured into a glass on her end. "Okay, define something, like a dead body? Or like a badger?" "I don't know." I said. I was pacing the kitchen now. The lawn guy heard crying today, and I just went down there and... Marissa, I swear I heard a sob, like a muffled sob, coming from the wall. "Alice, honey, take a breath." I took a breath. It was shaky. "Okay," she said. "You are in a house that was built when Coolidge was president. The foundation is limestone and brick. The plumbing is a patchwork nightmare. Remember when you thought someone was walking in the attic and it turned out to be the thermal expansion of the roof joists?" "Yes," I said, "but this sounded human." "Sound carries," she said firmly. "Sound is weird. If a cat is stuck in the crawl space, it sounds like a baby crying. It's a well-known thing. Or it could be the sump pump check valve fluttering. It didn't sound like a valve. Look, you are alone. You are stressed about Lily leaving. Your brain is looking for patterns. It's pareidolia. But for ears, audio pareidolia." I leaned against the counter. Her voice was steadying. It was the anchor I needed. "So what do I do?" I asked. "You call a pro," she said. "Don't go crawling around down there yourself. Call a pest inspector, or a plumber. Get someone to look at it in the daylight. Tonight, you pour yourself a glass of the good red, you put on headphones, and you watch a movie. If there is something down there, it's not coming through a locked door." You think I'm crazy? I think you are a mom who has spent 16 years worrying about everything, and now you have nowhere to put that worry. So you are putting it in the basement. I exhaled. She was right. It made sense. "Okay," I said. "I'll call someone tomorrow." "Good. Now go sit down. You're fine. The house is fine." We hung up. I did what she said. I poured the wine. I put on the headphones. I watched a movie. But I kept the volume low enough that I could still hear the house. I didn't sleep well. I dreamt of water. I dreamt that the basement was filling up. Not with water, but with the gray fog from the bus stop. And that the fog was screaming. Morning arrived with a gray, diffused light that did nothing to make the house feel warmer. I woke up with a stiff neck and a headache. I walked down the stairs, listening. The house was quiet, normal quiet. The scary quiet of the night had evaporated with the dawn. I went to the front door to check for the paper. When I opened the door, there was no newspaper on the mat. But there was something else. Tucked into the weather stripping of the door frame, right at eye level, was a white envelope. It wasn't a standard mailing envelope. It was small, square, like a thank you card envelope. There was no name on it, no address, no stamp. I stared at it. My heart started that traitorous thumping again. I reached out and plucked it from the frame. The paper felt cheap, thin. I turned it over. It wasn't sealed. The flap was just tucked in. I opened it. Inside was a single piece of plain printer paper. Folded once, I unfolded it. There was one line of text, printed in Standard Times New Roman, centered on the page. Please don't open it. My stomach dropped. It felt like the floor had vanished beneath me. I looked around the front yard. The street was empty. The neighbors' houses were quiet. A squirrel ran across the lawn. Please don't open it. Open what? The envelope? I had already opened it. The door? The basement? This wasn't a plumbing noise. This wasn't a raccoon. This was communication. I stepped back inside and locked the door. My hands were cold. I placed the paper on the entry table and stared at it. It looked so innocuous. Just words on paper. But the implication was terrifying. Someone had been on my porch. Someone had put this here. Was it a prank? Kids from the high school messing with the mom whose daughter was away? It didn't feel like a prank. Pranks were loud. Pranks were toilet paper in the trees or eggs on the siding. This was quiet. This was intimate. I grabbed my phone. My instinct was to call the police. But what would I say? I got a weird note? They would tell me it was junk mail or a wrong address. I needed to see Lily. I needed to know she was okay. I opened the school trip app. The group feed was full of updates. 7 a.m. Breakfast at the lodge. 8:30 a.m. Hiking the trail. I scrolled frantically until I found a photo. There she was, Lily. She was standing with two friends near a wooden signpost, wearing her blue fleece. She was smiling. Her cheeks were pink from the cold air. She looked happy. She looked safe. I stared at her face, zooming in until the pixels blurred. A wave of guilt washed over me. Here I was, spiraling into a panic attack over a noise and a piece of paper. While she was having the time of her life, I was ruining my own week. I was being the hysterical mother Marissa had warned me about. Maybe the note wasn't for me. Maybe it was dropped by mistake. Maybe it fell out of someone's bag. I tried to force the rational thoughts back into the driver's seat. Lily is safe. You are safe. It's a misunderstanding. But as I stood there in the hallway, looking from the bright, digital smile of my daughter to the stark, printed words on the table, I couldn't make the fear go away. I looked down the hall toward the kitchen, toward the pantry, toward the basement door. The house was silent, but it wasn't empty. I knew it now. I didn't know what was here, but the air felt charged, electric with unseen presence. I wasn't alone. And whatever was down there, it didn't want to be found, or someone didn't want me to find it. Please don't open it. I picked up the phone again. I wasn't calling the police, not yet. They would laugh. I searched for the number Marissa had mentioned. Pest inspection. I needed a witness. I needed someone with a flashlight and a reason to be there. I needed to prove to myself that the monsters were just mice, and the voices were just wind. But as I dialed the number, my eyes drifted back to the basement door. The draft was still there. I could feel it from here. A cold breath, exhaling from the dark. I pressed the call button. I'm hearing things. I rehearsed in my head. I'm just hearing things. But deep down, in the pit of my stomach where the fear lived, I knew the truth. The crying hadn't stopped. I just couldn't hear it right now. And whoever wrote the note knew it, too. The van from Graylin Home Crawl Services arrived at 10 in the morning. It was a reassuringly ugly vehicle, painted a bright, chemical yellow with a cartoon termite wearing a hard hat on the side. I stood on the porch, hugging my cardigan tight against the morning chill, and watched the technician hop out. He was a young guy, maybe 25, with a clipboard and the kind of heavy work boots that suggested he had seen the underside of half the houses in Maple Hollow. "Morning, ma'am," he said. "Ticket says you are hearing noises. Maybe a raccoon?" "Something like that," I said. "Or a cat. I just need to know what is down there." He nodded. "All business. I'll take a look. Usually, if it is a raccoon, you will see torn insulation. If it is a possum, you will smell it before you see it." I led him to the basement door. I stayed at the top of the stairs this time. I told myself it was to give him room to work, but the truth was that I didn't want to go back down there. I didn't want to feel that draft again. I listened to his boots clomp down the wooden steps. I heard the click of his heavy-duty flashlight. I heard him moving things, shifting a box, dragging the stepladder, for 20 minutes. I stood in the kitchen, pretending to organize the spice rack. I aligned the cumin and the paprika, my ears straining for a scream or a shout or the sound of a rabid animal attacking. But there was only the low murmur of the technician talking to himself and the beep of a measurement tool. Finally, he came back up. He looked dusty, with a cobweb trailing from his shoulder. But he didn't look alarmed. He looked confused. "Well?" I asked. He wiped his hands on a rag from his back pocket. "Clean as a whistle. Ma'am, I checked the perimeter, the joists, the sump pit, no droppings, no torn insulation, no nests. I even checked the trap behind the dryer. Nothing." I felt a wave of relief, followed immediately by a crash of frustration, but I heard it. I said, "My landscaper heard it. A crying sound." He shrugged, apologetic. "Old houses make noise. Wind cuts through the foundation vents and creates a whistle. Pipes expand. But I can tell you for a fact there is no animal down there." He paused, glancing down at his clipboard, then back at me. "There is one thing, though." "What?" "The north wall," he said. "Behind those metal shelving units? It looks like someone did some partitioning work a while back. There is a section of drywall there that doesn't quite match the age of the rest of the basement." "Partitioning?" "Yeah, like they sealed off a section. Maybe an old coal chute or a storage alcove. It looks newer than the rest. Not brand new, but newer." I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. "How much space?" I asked. "Hard to say without a blueprint. Maybe 3 feet deep?" "It is dead space, basically, but the seal is tight. Nothing is getting in or out of there." He ripped the carbon copy off his invoice pad and handed it to me. "That will be $90 for the inspection. Sorry I couldn't find your ghost, ma'am." I paid him and watched the yellow van drive away. The relief I had hoped for didn't come. Instead, I had a new phrase rattling around in my head. Dead space. I locked the door and went into the study. I needed paper. I needed facts. I dug out the heavy accordion folder labeled House Docs. I had kept everything from the closing 6 years ago: the deed, the title insurance, the terrifyingly high interest rate disclosure, and the inspection report. I spread the papers out on the desk. The inspection report was thick, bound in a plastic spiral. I flipped to the section on the basement. Foundation, poured concrete and brick. Satisfactory. Water intrusion. Minor efflorescence noted. Layout, utility room, laundry, storage alcove. I traced the word with my finger. Storage alcove. There was a rough sketch attached to the report. It showed the square footprint of the basement. In the northwest corner, there was a small indentation, a little rectangular niche labeled storage. I grabbed a ruler and the sketch and marched to the basement door. I forced myself to go down. The air was still cold. The smell of wet earth was still there. Subtle but persistent. I walked to the north wall, where the metal shelving unit stood, loaded with bins of Christmas ornaments and Lily's old baby clothes. I looked at the wall behind the shelves. The technician was right. The paint was a slightly different shade of beige. It was cleaner, less yellowed by time. I looked at the sketch in my hand. According to the drawing, the wall should have jogged back 3 feet here. It should have been an open alcove, but it was flat. Someone had built a wall across the opening of the alcove. They had sealed it off. Why? To hide a crack? To cover up mold? I pushed one of the heavy shelving units aside. The metal scraped loudly against the concrete floor. I put my hand on the drywall. It was cold. I rapped on it with my knuckles. Thud, thud. It sounded hollow. Not solid concrete, hollow. And then, from the other side, a sound returned. Tap, tap. I snatched my hand back as if the wall had burned me. I stumbled backward, tripping over a box of extension cords. I caught myself on the washing machine, my breath coming in short. Panicked gasps. Tap, tap. It was soft, deliberate. It wasn't settling. It wasn't the wind. Someone was tapping back. I ran upstairs. I didn't walk. I ran. I scrambled up the steps on my hands and knees and slammed the door, twisting the lock with trembling fingers. I stood in the hallway, gasping for air. My mind was screaming, "Call the police. Call them now." But then the doubt crept in. The technician had just been here. He said it was empty. If I called the police and said, "The wall tapped at me," they would think I was having a breakdown. I was the lonely single mom. The cliché. I needed proof. The doorbell rang. I jumped, letting out a small yelp. I walked to the front door and peered through the peephole. It was Devin. I opened the door. He was standing there with a rake in one hand and his phone in the other. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Hi, Ms. Henderson. Sorry to bother you again, Devin," I said. I was breathless. I finished the back lawn, but before I leave, I wanted to show you something. I know you said it was probably the wind, and I don't want to be weird, but I recorded it. He held out his phone. I took it. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. He pressed play. The video was shaky. It showed a close-up of the foundation vents on the west side of the house, the ones near that sealed alcove. The image was just gray concrete and green leaves. But the audio was clear. First, the rustle of wind. Then, a car passing in the distance. And then, underneath the ambient noise, a sound. The sobbing. And then, a rhythmic tapping. Click, 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 click. It sounded metallic, like a ring tapping against a pipe. I stared at the screen. The video looped. Click, click. "It's real," I whispered. Devin nodded. He looked pale. It gave me the creeps. "Ms. Henderson, real bad. That doesn't sound like an animal. Animals don't have rhythm like that." "No," I said. "They don't." I handed the phone back to him. "Thank you. Devin, can you send that to me?" "Yeah, sure." He typed on his screen. My phone buzzed in my pocket a moment later. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I don't know yet," I said, "but thank you for proving I'm not crazy." He looked at me, his young face serious. "You should get someone to look at that," he said. Really look at it. I watched him walk to his truck. He didn't look back this time. He just wanted to be gone. I went back inside. I had the video. I had the missing alcove. I had the tapping. I went back to the basement door. I didn't open it. I just stood there, staring at the wood grain. I needed to see that wall again. I went to the kitchen drawer and grabbed a screwdriver. A Phillips head. I went back down. I moved the shelving unit further away, creating a clear workspace. I shone my flashlight on the seams of the drywall. I looked closely at the screws holding the panel in place. Most of the screws in the basement, the ones holding up the utility brackets, the ones on the switch plates, were painted over. They were covered in years of beige latex, but the screws on this section of wall were different. They were silver. The heads were clean. They weren't covered in paint. They had been driven in recently. I reached out and touched one of the screw heads. It felt sharp, new. Someone had closed this wall up, and they had done it after the room was painted. I pressed my ear against the drywall. "Are you there?" I whispered. Silence. I tapped the wall. One hard knock. Thump. I waited. A second passed. 2. Then, faint but distinct. Thump. A response. My heart hammered against my ribs. It wasn't a pipe. Pipes didn't listen. "Who are you?" I hissed. The tapping stopped abruptly. I pulled back. The silence that followed felt heavy, watchful. It felt like the silence of someone holding their breath. I rushed back upstairs. I needed to call the police. I didn't care if I sounded crazy. There was a person behind my wall. I was reaching for my phone when the doorbell rang again. I froze. Had Devin come back? I went to the door. I didn't check the peephole this time. I just threw it open, desperate for an ally. It wasn't Devin. It was Judith Renner from 3 doors down. Judith was the kind of neighbor who knew exactly when your trash cans were left out too long. She was 60, impeccably dressed in activewear she never exercised in, and possessed a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was holding a foil-wrapped loaf. "Alice," she chirped. "Judith," I said, blocking the doorway with my body. "I was just baking and I made too much banana bread," she said, thrusting the loaf toward me. "I know how much Lily loves it. Is she around?" "She's on a school trip," I said. The lie came automatically, though it wasn't really a lie. I just didn't want Judith knowing my business. "Oh, that's right. The trip to D.C., isn't it? Or is it the mountains?" "The mountains," I said. She nodded, her eyes scanning my face. She looked at my hair, which was messy. She looked at the screwdriver I was still clutching in my right hand. "You look tired, Alice," she said. Her voice dropped an octave, into a register of performative concern. "I'm fine," I said. "Just doing some repairs." "Are you all alone here for the week, then?" "Yes. That must be hard. It's a big house for one person, especially with everything." "Everything?" I asked sharp. "Oh, you know, the world, the stress." I was talking to the girls at book club, and we were just saying how overwhelmed everyone seems lately. She took a half step closer. "Have you heard of Harborstone Outreach?" My stomach tightened. That name again. "I got a flyer." I said, "They are wonderful," she said. "Really wonderful. Rowan Fell runs it. He is a saint. They help moms who are stressed, who are feeling unstable. I am not unstable." "Judith, of course not," she said quickly. "But we all need support. If you ever feel like things are getting to be too much, like you are hearing things or seeing things, they have great resources." "Hearing things?" I stared at her. Why would she say that? Judith's eyes flickered past my shoulder. She wasn't looking at the kitchen. She was looking down the hallway, toward the basement door. It was a quick glance, a micro-movement. But I saw it. "Why did you look at the basement?" I asked. "I didn't." She laughed. A brittle sound. "I was just admiring your runner." "Is that new?" I didn't answer. I just held the door. "I have to go. Judith, I have work to do." "Well, enjoy the bread," she said. "And call if you need anything at all. We are all watching out for you." She turned and walked down the path. "We are all watching out for you." It sounded like a threat. I closed the door and locked it. I threw the banana bread in the trash. I didn't trust it. I dialed the police. Not 911. I dialed the non-emergency line for Maple Hollow PD. "Dispatcher." A woman's voice said, "Hi, this is Alice Henderson. I live at 412 Elm. I need to request a welfare check on my own house." "A welfare check on your own house? Are you in danger, ma'am?" "I don't know." I said, "I think there is someone in my basement, or behind the wall in my basement. I hear crying and tapping, and I found a wall that looks like it was sealed up recently. Is there an intruder currently in the home?" "No, I mean, not walking around. They are trapped, or hiding, behind a wall." "Okay, ma'am. Is this a house or an apartment?" "A house. And you are the owner?" "Yes. Have you been drinking today, ma'am?" "No," I snapped. "Listen to me. I have video evidence of sounds coming from the foundation. My neighbor heard it too. Ma'am, we get a lot of calls about noises in old houses, especially when people are alone. It is usually pipes or rodents. It is not a rodent. It tapped back when I knocked." "Okay, look, if you want an officer to come out, we can put you in the queue. But if they get there and it is just a raccoon, you might be cited for misuse of resources. We are very short-staffed today." "Cited?" I asked, incredulous. "I am telling you there is a person in my wall. If you are concerned about the structure, you should call a handyman." The dispatcher said, her voice bored, "Or an exterminator. We don't tear down walls, ma'am, unless there is an active threat. Is someone threatening you right now? I looked at the note on the table. Please don't open it. Yes, I said. I received a threatening note. What did it say? It said, please don't open it. The dispatcher paused. I could hear her typing. Ma'am, that sounds like a warning, not a threat. Maybe it was left by a previous contractor? Look, call a handyman. If they open the wall and find a person, call us back. She hung up. I stood there, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. I felt small. I felt foolish. I felt exactly how they wanted me to feel. Call a handyman. Fine. I went to my laptop. I searched for local contractors. I skipped the big chains. I found a listing for Brandt Sons Renovation, a family business. I called the number, Brandt. A man answered, gruff voice. Hi, I need someone to look at a wall in my basement. I said, I think it was built illegally. I need it opened up. I can come by around 4. He said, I'm in the area. Thank you. At 4 o'clock, a white pickup truck pulled in. Elias Brandt was a giant of a man, with graying hair and a tool belt that looked like it was part of his anatomy. He didn't smile, but he didn't look dismissive either. I took him downstairs. I showed him the wall. I showed him the screws. He squinted at them. He took out a magnetic stud finder and ran it over the drywall. Studs are weird, he muttered. They aren't 16 on center. They are random, like they just jammed wood in there to hold the sheetrock up. Can you open it? I asked. He stood back, crossing his arms. I can, he said, but you need to know what you're getting into. If I open this and we find black mold, I have to report it. If I open it and the wiring is not to code, I have to report it. You could be looking at thousands of dollars in mandated repairs. The city is strict about this stuff. I don't care about the money. I said, I think there is something back there. He looked at me. He saw the tension in my shoulders. All right, he said, but I can't do it today. I need to bring my scope camera. I don't want to just start swinging a sledgehammer if there are pipes or wires behind it. I'll come back tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? I can't wait that long. Lady, it is 4:30 on a Tuesday. I have to go pick up my kid. I'll be here at 8 sharp. Don't touch it until then. If you hit a load-bearing post, the kitchen comes down on your head. He left. I was alone again. The house felt tighter now. The walls felt like they were leaning in. I spent the evening sitting in the kitchen, staring at the basement door. I had pushed the heavy oak table in front of it. It was a childish barricade, but it made me feel slightly better. I texted Lily. How is the trip? Miss you? She replied instantly. A photo of her and her friends eating s'mores by a fire, having fun. Love you, Mom. She was safe. That was the only thing keeping me sane. I went to bed at midnight, but I didn't sleep. I lay there, listening. The tapping had stopped. The crying had stopped, but the silence was worse. It was the silence of anticipation. At 2 a.m, my phone lit up on the nightstand. I jolted awake, grabbing it. Unknown caller. My heart hammered. Who calls at 2 a.m? I answered. Hello? Silence. No, not silence. Breathing. It was wet, ragged breathing, like someone with fluid in their lungs. Who is this? I whispered. Then, a sound. A sob. Faint, distant, and then a voice, barely a whisper. Help. Then the line clicked dead. I sat up, clutching the phone. My skin was ice cold. I dialed 69, number unknown. I sat there in the dark, the display of my phone casting a ghostly blue light on the sheets. I needed to record this. I needed to document it. I opened the voice memo app. I pressed record. It is 2:15 a.m. I whispered, I just got a call. Someone was crying. Someone said help. I am at 412 Elm Street. If anything happens to me... I stopped. I played it back. My voice sounded frantic, high-pitched, unhinged. If anything happens to me... I sounded like the unstable mom Judith had warned me about. I sounded like the nuisance caller the police dispatcher had dismissed. If I showed this to anyone, would they believe me? Or would they use it to prove that I was cracking up, that I shouldn't be alone, that maybe I wasn't fit to be a mother? The fear of the basement was suddenly eclipsed by a newer, sharper fear. The fear of being labeled, the fear of losing credibility. I looked at the delete button. Don't do it. A voice in my head said, keep the evidence. But the shame was stronger. The fear of sounding crazy was stronger. I pressed delete. The recording vanished. I lay back down, pulling the duvet up to my chin. I stared at the ceiling, waiting for the sun, while the house breathed around me, holding its secrets tight in the dark. Elias Brandt arrived at 8 o'clock in the morning, just as he had promised. He brought the smell of sawdust and stale coffee into my hallway, a grounding, masculine scent that made the house feel slightly less like a trap. He was carrying a hard plastic case that looked like it belonged to a sniper, but when he set it down on the kitchen island and snapped the latches open, it revealed a fiber optic camera scope and a heavy-duty drill. You didn't touch it? He asked, looking at me over the rim of his glasses. I shook my head. I haven't been downstairs since you left. I barricaded the door with the table. He raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. He just picked up the case. Let's go see what you have got, he said. I pushed the heavy oak table aside, the legs screeching against the hardwood. It was a humiliating sound, the sound of my own fear being dismantled, but I didn't care. I unlocked the door and let him down. The basement was quiet. The morning sun was trying to push through the small, high windows, casting weak rectangles of light onto the concrete. Elias walked straight to the sealed section behind the metal shelves. He moved with the confidence of a man who knew how houses were put together and how they fell apart. He took out a tape measure and a stud finder, moving them across the painted drywall with methodical slowness. Here's the thing, he said, tapping the wall with the handle of his screwdriver. Standard framing is 16 inches on center. You do that so the drywall doesn't sag. But this? He ran the stud finder across the surface. It beeped erratically. You have a stud here, then another one 6 inches later, then a gap of 2 feet, then a cluster of 3. What does that mean? I asked. I was standing near the washing machine, my arms crossed tight over my chest. It means whoever built this didn't know what they were doing, or they were using scraps, he said. This wasn't a contractor. This was a weekend warrior, or someone in a hurry. He crouched down near the floor, shining his flashlight into the corner where the new wall met the old foundation. And look at this. I stepped closer, fighting the urge to retreat. He pointed to a small, rectangular vent grill near the floor. It was painted the same beige as the wall, blending in almost perfectly. That is a return vent, he said, or it is supposed to be. But look at the angle. He pulled a screwdriver from his belt and quickly removed the 2 screws holding the grill in place. He pulled the metal cover off. Behind it, the ductwork didn't go up into the ceiling. It curved sharply to the left, vanishing into the sealed space. Why would they do that? I asked. Ventilation, he said. He looked up at me, his expression grim. If this was just dead storage, you wouldn't need active airflow. You would just seal it up. But someone routed a fresh air intake into this space. They wanted air to get in, but they didn't want anyone to see inside. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the basement temperature. Open it, I said. Elias stood up. He looked at the wall, then at me. You are sure? He asked. Once I drill, you can't undrill. If there is nothing back there but moldy insulation, you are going to have a hole in your wall and a bill from me. I don't care about the wall. Elias, drill the hole. He nodded. He picked up the heavy drill and fitted a 1-inch spade bit into the chuck. The sound of the metal locking into place was sharp and final. He positioned the drill right in the center of the panel, about 4 feet off the ground. Here we go, he said. He pulled the trigger. The whine of the drill filled the small room, deafening and aggressive. Dust plumed out as the bit into the drywall. It went through easily, too easily. There was no insulation behind it to slow it down. Elias pulled the drill back. A neat, round hole, the size of a quarter, stared back at us, a black eye in the beige face of the wall. Immediately, a puff of air escaped. I felt it hit my face. It was cold, colder than the basement, and it smelled. It didn't smell like mold. It didn't smell like dead rats. It smelled like unwashed bodies and chemical cleaner, a sharp, ammonia-tinged scent that made my stomach turn. Elias wrinkled his nose. "What is that?" he muttered. He leaned in, putting his ear near the hole. I held my breath. For 5 seconds, there was only the hum of the refrigerator upstairs, and then we both heard it. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't the wind. It was a sharp intake of breath, clear as day. And then a voice, a whimper. "Please." Elias recoiled. He jumped back a full 2 feet, nearly tripping over his own tool case. His face, which had been stoic a moment ago, was suddenly pale. "Did you hear that?" he demanded. His voice was loud, cracking with shock. "I heard it," I whispered. "I told you. That is a person," he said. "That is a human being." He scrambled for his phone. "I am calling 911. Right now. We need to get a sledgehammer. We need to get that wall down." He was tapping furiously on his screen. I felt a surge of vindication so powerful it almost knocked me over. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't lonely. There was someone there. I stepped toward the hole. "We are going to get you out," I shouted at the wall. "Hold on." From the darkness of the hole, there was no answer, only a sound. Shh, shh. A shuffling sound, like someone dragging their feet across a floor, moving away from the hole, moving deeper into the dark. Elias had the phone to his ear. "Yeah, I need police to 412 Elm Street. I have a—" He stopped. He pulled the phone away from his ear and looked at it. "No signal?" I asked. "No. I have bars," he said. "But, hold on." He walked toward the stairs, trying to get a better connection. As he put his foot on the first step, a heavy pounding shook the front door upstairs. Boom, boom, boom. We both froze. "Police?" Elias asked. "I didn't call them yet," I said, "and you just dialed." The pounding came again, authoritative, demanding. I ran up the stairs. Elias close behind me. I unlocked the front door and threw it open, expecting to see a uniform, expecting to see rescue, but it wasn't the police. A white sedan was parked in my driveway. Right behind Elias's truck, it had the City of Maple Hollow seal on the door. Standing on my porch was a woman. She was short, with hair cut into a severe, angular bob that looked like a helmet. She wore a navy blue windbreaker with code compliance embroidered in gold thread over the pocket. She held a clipboard against her chest like a shield. "Ms. Henderson?" she asked. Her voice was pleasant, professional, and completely devoid of warmth. "Yes?" I said. I was breathless. "Who are you?" "I am Officer Dana Klein." "Maple Hollow Code Enforcement. We received a report regarding unpermitted structural alterations and potential hazardous materials at this address." She didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped forward, forcing me to back up into the foyer. I stared at her. "A report?" My contractor is here right now. We just found someone." "Found someone?" Dana Klein paused. Her eyes scanned the hallway, landing on Elias, who was standing by the kitchen island, still holding his phone. "Sir, are you performing demolition work on this property?" she asked him. "I drilled a hole," Elias said. He looked rattled. "Look, lady, there is someone trapped in the basement, behind a false wall. I was just calling the cops." "Trapped?" Dana repeated. She didn't look alarmed. She looked skeptical. She looked like a teacher listening to a student explain why they didn't have their homework. She pulled a pen from her pocket and clicked it. "We received an anonymous tip 20 minutes ago that the homeowner was attempting to breach a load-bearing containment wall that may seal off pre-existing asbestos or black mold." She said, 20 minutes ago? I said, "My contractor wasn't even here 20 minutes ago." Dana ignored me. She looked at Elias. "Do you have a permit to open that wall?" "Sir?" "No," Elias said. "I was doing an inspection. But listen to me. We heard a voice. The city takes mold containment very seriously." Dana said, her voice dropping into a lecture. "If you breach a sealed environmental hazard without a containment zone, you are violating City Code 804.2. I can issue a stop work order immediately. In fact, if the seal is broken, I am required to condemn the property temporarily until a hazmat team can clear it." "Condemn?" I said. My voice rose. You want to kick me out of my house? There is a person downstairs. Dana turned to me. Her expression softened. But it wasn't a kindness. It was a mask of pity. Ms. Henderson, she said, I understand you have been under a lot of stress. I see that your daughter is away. How do you know that? I asked. It's a small town. She said, Look, old houses make noises. Air pressure changes when you drill holes. It creates a vacuum effect. It can sound like all sorts of things. It wasn't air pressure, I shouted. It was a woman. She said, Please. Dana sighed. She made a note on her clipboard. Ms. Henderson, if you continue to insist on unpermitted demolition, I will have to post a red tag on your door. That means you cannot sleep here tonight. You will have to go to a hotel, and the fines start at $5,000 per day. She looked at Elias. And you, sir, if you touch that wall again without a permit, I will pull your license. I know Brant's sons. Your father wouldn't want to lose his bonding over a hysteria call. Elias went pale. He looked at me, then back at Dana. I can't lose my license, he said. Elias, please, I begged. You heard it. I heard something, he said, his voice wavering. But maybe it was the air. Like she said, it smelled chemical. Dana nodded approvingly. Exactly. Chemical fumes. Probably old cleaning solvents stored in the alcove. You don't want to breathe that. She reached into her bag and pulled out a bright orange sticker. I am going to issue a warning today, she said. Do not expand that hole. Do not open the wall. Tape it over immediately. I will be back in 48 hours to inspect the seal. If it is tampered with, I will condemn the building. Do you understand? She held the clipboard out for me to sign. I looked at the paper. It was a notice of non-compliance. I am not signing that, I said. Then I will note your refusal, she said smoothly. It makes the eviction process faster if we have to go down that road. She tore the pink copy off and placed it gently on the entry table, right next to the "Please don't open it" note that I had left there yesterday. She saw the note. Her eyes lingered on it for a fraction of a second too long. A flicker of recognition? Have a safe day, Ms. Henderson, she said. She turned and walked out. I watched her get into her white sedan. She picked up a radio microphone and spoke into it before backing out of the driveway. Elias was packing up his tools. He was moving fast. I'm sorry, Ms. Henderson, he said. He wouldn't look me in the eye. I can't fight the city. Not for this. But you heard it. I whispered. I don't know what I heard, he said. He snapped the case shut. Tape up the hole. Don't let the fumes get out. He fled. There was no other word for it. He practically ran to his truck. I stood in the hallway, the silence of the house rushing back in to fill the space where the noise had been. I looked at the pink slip on the table. Anonymous tip. 20 minutes ago. I had decided to drill the hole. 20 minutes ago. Someone called the city. It wasn't possible. Unless someone was watching. Unless someone was listening. I walked into the living room and looked out the window. The street was empty, but the feeling of eyes on me was physical. It was like an itch under my skin. I grabbed a roll of duct tape from the kitchen drawer. I went back downstairs. The hole was still there. The cold air was still seeping out. I put my ear near it one last time. I am sorry, I whispered. I am so sorry. They are watching me. There was no answer, just the faint, rhythmic sound of shuffling. I taped over the hole. I put 3 layers of silver tape over it. It felt like I was suffocating someone. I went back upstairs and sat on the floor of the kitchen, my back against the cabinets. I was shaking. I needed Marissa. I called her. She didn't answer. I texted her. Come over. Now. Please. She arrived 10 minutes later. She didn't knock. She used the spare key I kept under the planter. Alice? She called out. I'm in the kitchen, I said. She rushed in, her heels clicking on the tile. She took one look at me and dropped her purse. What happened? Did you find a rat? I found a code compliance officer, I said, and a wall that talks. I told her everything. The drill, the smell, the voice, Dana Klein, the threat of condemnation. Marissa listened, her face growing serious. She poured me a glass of water and made me drink it. Okay, she said. Okay, that is a lot. But Alice, think about it. Code compliance doesn't show up in 20 minutes. It takes them 3 weeks to approve a deck permit. Exactly. I said, they knew. Someone knew I was drilling. Marissa walked to the front door to check the lock. As she did, she stopped. Alice, she said, when did you get the mail? I didn't. I said, I haven't been outside. She opened the door and bent down. She picked something up from the porch mat. It was a brochure. Glossy, blue and green, Harborstone Outreach. She walked back into the kitchen, holding it by the corner like it was evidence. This wasn't here when I came in, she said. I would have stepped on it. Someone put this here while we were talking. While you were telling me about the officer, I took it from her. It was identical to the mailer I had thrown away. But this one was a trifold brochure. I opened it. The text was standard nonprofit jargon, supporting families, building bridges. But on the back panel, there was a section highlighted in red box. Crisis stabilization. Are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you hearing or seeing things that distress you? Our mobile crisis team is discreet and compassionate. We can help with involuntary assessment and placement. Involuntary assessment. I looked at Marissa. They are building a case. I said. My voice was trembling. Judith asking if I was unstable. The police dispatcher calling me a nuisance. Now this. They want to make me look crazy so that if I say, there is a woman in my basement, everyone will just say, poor Alice. She finally snapped. Marissa took the brochure back. This hotline number, she said, it is not the standard county crisis line. It is a private number. She looked at me. We need to be careful. Alice, if they can condemn the house, they can force you out. If they force you out, they can do whatever they want with that wall. The doorbell rang. We both jumped. It is Grand Central Station today, Marissa whispered. She went to the peephole. It is the lawn kid, she said. Devin. I wiped my face and went to the door. I opened it. Devin was standing there, looking terrified. He wasn't wearing his work clothes. He was wearing a hoodie and jeans. He looked like he hadn't slept. Ms. Henderson, he said, I can't stay. I needed to tell you something. Come inside. Devin, I said. He shook his head. No, I don't want to be in the house. I just remembered something. He looked over his shoulder at the street. You know how I said I used to do work for Rowan Fell? The guy who runs Harborstone? Yes, I said. I did some landscaping for him last summer, at his personal house, and then at a few rental properties he manages. He used to ask me to check the crawl spaces. Check them for what? Marissa asked, stepping into the doorway. He wanted to know if they were accessible from the outside. Devin said, he wanted to know if the vents were big enough to pass things through. He said it was for security audits, to make sure homeless people couldn't get in. He paused, swallowing hard, but he was really specific. Ms. Henderson. He wanted to know about sound. He asked me, if a dog was trapped under there, how far would the bark carry? I felt the blood drain from my face, and I told him. Devin continued. I told him that in these old houses, the brick muffles everything. Unless you are right on top of it. He looked at me, his eyes wide. I think he was shopping for houses. Ms. Henderson. Houses that were soundproof. And he found one. I whispered, mine. Devin nodded. I gotta go, he said. If he sees my truck here, just be careful. Please. He ran back to his truck and peeled away. I looked at Marissa. Rowan fell. I said, we need more proof. Marissa said, we can't go to the police with, the lawn boy said so. We need something hard. I thought about the smell, the cold air, the fact that the person down there was alive. Alive meant they needed things. Food, water, heat, light. I ran to the living room and grabbed my laptop. What are you doing? Marissa asked. I am checking the utilities. I said, I logged into my account for the electric company. My fingers were flying across the keys. I pulled up the usage graph. Look, I said. The graph showed blue bars for every hour of the day. High in the evening when lights were on, low during the day, but look at the early mornings. Every single day, between 4 a.m. and 5 a.m., there was a spike, a sharp, consistent jump in kilowatt usage. "What is that?" Marissa asked. "It is not the heat," I said. "The heat is gas. It is not the water heater." I clicked on the details. It is a steady draw, like a space heater, or a hot plate, or a heavy-duty ventilation fan. Marissa said, "To clear the smell. Someone is using power down there." I said, "My power." I looked at the date range. The spikes went back 3 years. 3 years. My stomach turned. I had been living on top of this for 3 years. I had watched TV, cooked dinner, laughed with Lily, all while someone was beneath me, drawing power to survive in a box. Lily. I slammed the laptop shut. "I need to call her." I said. I grabbed my phone and dialed Lily's number. It went straight to voicemail. "Hi, it's Lily. Leave a message." I dialed the chaperone's number. Mrs. Gable gave it to me. It was the emergency line for the trip. It rang 4 times. "Hello, this is Mrs. Vickers?" A cheerful voice answered. "Hi, this is Alice Henderson, Lily's mom. I need to speak to her." "Oh, hello, Mrs. Henderson. Is it an emergency?" Yes, I need to hear her voice. I'm so sorry. But the girls are in the middle of a cave tour right now," Mrs. Vickers said. "No reception underground. And we have a strict no phones during activities policy to keep them present in the moment. Please." I said, "I just need 1 minute. I will have her call you when they are back at the lodge tonight. Around 9? But I promise she is fine. She is having a blast. Don't worry." "Mom." The line clicked. She hung up on me. I stared at the phone. "Don't worry." "Mom." It felt coordinated. The trip, the note, the city inspector, the brochure. They were cutting me off. They were isolating me. They were waiting for me to crack. But they had made a mistake. They thought isolating me would make me weak. They thought taking away my daughter's voice would make me collapse. They were wrong. I looked at Marissa. "I am not going to a hotel." I said. "Good," she said. "And I am not taping that hole shut forever. What are we going to do?" "We are going to wait for tonight," I said. Devin said the sound carries. I looked at the baby monitor sitting on the shelf, a relic I had never thrown away. We are going to listen. Night came too fast. The sun dropped like a stone, and the house plunged into darkness. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't want them to know where I was in the house. Marissa and I sat on the kitchen floor, the baby monitor receiver between us. The transmitter was downstairs, plugged into an extension cord right next to the taped-over hole. The monitor hissed, static, the hum of the sump pump. We sat there for hours. 7 o'clock, 8, 9, at 9:15. Lily didn't call. I texted the chaperone, no reply. My fear was turning into something else. It was turning into a cold, hard rage. They were touching my life. They were touching my child. At 11 o'clock, the monitor crackled. Click. Someone had turned something on downstairs. The hum of a fan? No, it was smoother. An air purifier? Then, the crying started. It was clearer through the monitor than it had been through the floor. It was a woman's voice, exhausted, broken. "Please, I can't." Marissa grabbed my hand. Her grip was tight enough to bruise, and then, a second sound. It came from the monitor, but it sounded different. Closer to the mic? Or just different? It was a whisper. "Shh, not yet." I froze. The voice was low, controlled. It wasn't a child. It wasn't a teenager. It was an adult. "They are upstairs," the voice whispered. Quiet. The crying hitched. "I want to go home. This is home," the voice said. Smooth, terrifyingly calm. "You are safe here. They want to hurt you out there. I am the only one who keeps you safe." I stared at the plastic speaker. It wasn't a kidnapping, not a normal one. It was conditioning. "Eat," the voice said. "Then we sleep. We sleep." There were 2 people down there. I looked at Marissa. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the green light of the monitor. "That is a man," she mouthed. I realized then that the horror wasn't just bureaucracy. It wasn't just a trapped victim. Someone was coming into my house. Someone was entering that space, maybe every night. They had a key. They had an entrance I didn't know about. And right now, they were directly beneath our feet. I stood up. "Where are you going?" Marissa hissed. I grabbed the heavy cast-iron skillet from the stove. "I'm going to find out how they get in." I said, "Alice, no. He's down there. I don't care." I said, "This is my house." But as I took a step toward the basement door, the monitor crackled again. "She is listening." The man's voice whispered, "I can hear her walking." He was listening to us, too. "Be quiet," he hissed, "or I will have to move you again." The crying stopped instantly. The feed went dead. He had turned off the transmitter. I stood in the dark kitchen, the heavy iron pan hanging useless at my side. He knew. He was down there, in the dark, holding a woman captive. And he was laughing at me. He thought he had won. He thought the threat of moving her would keep me silent. He was right. For tonight. But tomorrow I was going to burn his world down. Not with fire, with the one thing bureaucrats and secret keepers feared more than anything: exposure. I looked at Marissa. "Call the reporter." I said, "Call Tessa Ward. Now, right now. We aren't fighting a ghost anymore. We are fighting a landlord, and I'm going to evict him." I sat in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store 2 towns over, watching the shoppers push their carts through the gray drizzle. I had left my house to make the call. I did not trust my landline. I did not trust the silence of my own kitchen. The baby monitor was in the trunk, wrapped in a towel, as if the device itself could listen to me. I dialed the number for the Maple Hollow Sentinel. It was a dying paper, a thin stack of ads and high school sports scores that landed in driveways on Wednesdays. But it was the only independent voice left in the county. "News desk." A voice answered. It sounded tired. It sounded like cigarette smoke and cheap coffee. "I am looking for Tessa Ward." I said, "Speaking. My name is Alice Henderson. I have a story about code compliance, Harborstone outreach, and a woman trapped in a basement." There was a pause on the line. I expected a laugh. I expected a click. Instead, I heard the click of a lighter. "Code compliance?" Tessa asked. "Who showed up? Dana Klein?" "Yes," I said. "How fast?" 20 minutes after I drilled a hole in my wall." Silence. Then the exhale of smoke. "Meet me at the kettle on Route 9, she said. 30 minutes. "Do not bring your phone." The kettle was a diner that smelled of bacon grease and sanitizer. Tessa Ward was sitting in a corner booth. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and hair that looked like she cut it herself with kitchen shears. She had a notepad on the table and no coffee. I sat down. I felt exposed. Every time the door chime rang, I flinched. "Tell me," Tessa said. "Start with the drilling," I told her. I told her about the lawn guy, the crying, the sealed alcove, the cold air, and the voice. I told her about Elias Brandt fleeing in terror and Dana Klein showing up with a pre-written threat. When I finished, Tessa didn't look shocked. She looked resigned. She tapped her pen against the Formica table. "You are stepping into a machine. Alice," she said, "you think you are fighting a ghost or a squatter. You are not. You are fighting the municipal ecosystem." "What does that mean?" I asked. "Harborstone outreach," she said. "Do you know who sits on their board?" "The mayor's wife." "The city attorney, the head of the zoning commission." My stomach turned. "They are a charity." I said, "They are a contractor," Tessa corrected. "They handle housing transitions for the county, emergency placements, when the shelters are full, or when there is a case that falls through the cracks, mental health holds, domestic disputes where no one pressed charges. Harborstone steps in. They get paid per head, per night, to provide safe, discreet environments. In people's basements?" I whispered. Tessa leaned in. "Officially?" "No, officially. They have facilities. But facilities cost money. Overhead cuts into the grant funding. Rumor is, they have a network of foster homes for adults. Off the books, no oversight. Just quiet places to stash people who are inconvenient to the system until the paperwork clears or the funding runs out. And if the people want to leave, then they are labeled non-compliant. Tessa said, unstable, a danger to themselves. If they run, the police bring them back, not to jail, but to Harborstone. It is a loop, and Rowan Fell is the ringmaster. She wrote the name Rowan Fell on her pad and circled it. He is a darling of the city, she said. He cleans up the mess. He makes the homeless problem disappear from the downtown parks. He takes the screaming women off the street corners. The city pays him to keep Maple Hollow looking perfect. If you expose him, you are not just attacking a guy. You are attacking the city's ability to pretend it doesn't have problems. That is why Dana Klein showed up. I said, she is protecting the contract. She is protecting the status quo. Tessa said, and she will bury you to do it. They will paint you as hysterical. Then they will paint you as dangerous. Then they will take your house. They already started. I said, my neighbor called me unstable. Tessa nodded grimly. That is the playbook. You need hard evidence. Alice, not sounds, not smells. You need paper. I went to City Hall straight from the diner. I didn't go to the code enforcement window. I went to the Hall of Records in the basement, a room that smelled of dust and decaying adhesive. I requested the jacket for my property, 412 Elm Street. The clerk, a bored teenager, handed me a thick folder. I took it to a viewing table in the back. I went through every permit, every tax assessment, every lien release. I found it near the bottom of the stack. It was a building permit from 4 years ago, the year before I bought the house. Permit number 88B04, Structural Safety Update / Environmental Seal. It described the installation of a non-load-bearing partition for thermal efficiency in the basement. I looked at the signature of the applicant. It was an illegible scrawl, a series of loops that looked like a heart monitor flatlining. Then I looked at the approval stamp. It was stamped approved, but there was no inspector's initials. I pulled out my phone. I had left it in the car as Tessa instructed, but I had brought my old digital camera. I took a picture of the document without flash. Then I looked at the permit number again, 88-B-04. I flipped to the other permits in the file. A deck repair from 2 years ago, P-2022-45. A roof replacement from 10 years ago, P-2014-12. The city format was P-year-number 88-B-04, didn't match the format. It looked like a file number for a patient, or a case number for a court docket. It wasn't a building permit, it was a placement code disguised as a permit. I put the file back. My hands were shaking. They hadn't just hidden a woman in my basement. They had filed her existence in the city archives, buried under layers of bureaucratic camouflage. I drove home. The house looked innocent in the afternoon sun. The hydrangeas were blooming. The porch swing was still. Devin's truck was in the driveway. He was kneeling by the side of the house, near the chimney. He wasn't raking. He was pulling at the wooden lattice that skirted the foundation. "Devin?" I called out. He jumped, spinning around. He looked pale. "Ms. Henderson," he said. "I came back. I couldn't stop thinking about the layout. What are you doing?" "I was looking for the clean-out," he said. "The chimney clean-out. Usually, there is a little iron door down here to scoop out the ash. But your chimney is gas, right?" "Yes," I said. "It was converted years ago." "Right, so the clean-out should be sealed. But look," he pointed to a section of the lattice. It looked identical to the rest of the skirt. White wood, crisscrossed in a diamond pattern. But the vines growing on it were dead. They had been cut at the root, but left woven into the wood to look natural. Devin reached out and pulled on the lattice panel. It swung open on hidden hinges. Behind it was not a dirt crawl space. There was a plywood tunnel. A box, constructed of marine-grade wood, running from the opening toward the foundation wall. It was about 3 feet high and 2 feet wide, just big enough for a person to crawl through on their hands and knees. It bypassed the main basement. It went straight to the northwest corner, straight to the sealed alcove. Devin shone his flashlight down the tunnel. "There is a door at the end," he whispered. "A little door." I stared at the tunnel. It was a chute, a delivery system. "This is how they get in," I said. "This is how he feeds her. And this is how he gets in to keep her quiet," Devon said. I looked at the simple hook and eye latch on the lattice. It wasn't locked. Anyone could walk up from the street, open the panel, and disappear into my foundation. I felt a wave of nausea. The violation was absolute. My home was not a fortress. It was a cage, and I was just the roof over it. "We should go in," Devon said. He didn't sound like he wanted to. He sounded like he thought he had to. "No," I said. "If we go in, and he is there, or if we let her out and the police show up, Dana Klein said she would condemn the house if I touched the seal. If I drag a woman out through the garden lattice, they will say I kidnapped her. They will say I am the one holding her." I looked at Devon. "We need to catch him," I said. "We need to catch him entering." That night, Marissa and I sat in the kitchen again. We didn't use the extension cord this time. We put the baby monitor unit outside, hidden in the hydrangeas, aimed right at the lattice panel. It was battery-operated. We taped over the power light. We sat in the dark, watching the receiver. At 2 a.m, the monitor crackled. Scritch. The sound of wood on wood. Then, the soft grunt of exertion. "Okay," a voice whispered. "In we go." It was the same voice as before, the smooth, calm male voice. I looked at Marissa. "He is here," she mouthed. We listened to the sound of him crawling through the tunnel. It was a long, hollow, dragging sound. Then, a distant metallic click. The inner door opening. Then, the crying started. Immediate. Pavlovian. "Please," the woman's voice sobbed. "Please let me see the sun." "Not yet," the man said. "You are not ready. You are still agitated. We talked about this. Nora, agitation leads to mistakes. Nora." Her name was Nora. "I am not agitated." She wept. "I am just scared." "Fear is a choice." The man said, "We are working on your resilience. Did you eat the sandwich?" "I am not hungry." "Eat," he commanded. The smoothness vanished from his voice, replaced by a jagged edge of authority. "If you do not eat, you are engaging in self-harm. If you engage in self-harm, I cannot advocate for your release. Do you want to stay here forever?" "No," she whimpered. "Then eat, and be quiet. The woman upstairs is listening. Do you want her to get in trouble? Do you want the police to come and take you to the state hospital? You remember the hospital. Nora? The restraints?" "No," she sobbed. "Not the hospital. Then be good." I gripped the edge of the table. He was using me. He was using the threat of me to keep her compliant. He was using the threat of the system to make this dungeon seem like a mercy. Marissa was recording the audio on her phone. Her hand was shaking, but she held it steady near the speaker. We listened for an hour. He didn't leave. He stayed down there. We heard the murmur of his voice, reading to her, lecturing her. It was a low drone, punctuated by her soft sniffling. He was comfortable. He was the master of that space. At 4 a.m, we heard the crawl back out. The latch on the lattice clicked shut. He was gone. The next morning, my phone rang at 8. It was a local number. "Hello?" I answered. I hadn't slept. My eyes felt like they were full of sand. "Alice Henderson?" "Yes. This is Rowan Fell. From Harborstone Outreach." The voice was unmistakable. It was the voice from the tunnel. The voice that had told Nora to eat. My blood ran cold. I sat down on the floor, my back against the cabinets. "Mr. Fell," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady. "Please, call me Rowan. I am calling because, well, this is a bit delicate. I had a chat with Judith Renner yesterday. She is a dear friend of our organization. She mentioned that you seem to be under a great deal of distress." I gripped the phone. "I am fine." "Rowan, of course," he said. "But she mentioned you were hearing things, voices in the basement, and that you were having some conflict with the city inspectors?" He paused. The silence was heavy. "Alice, I want you to know that Harborstone isn't just for the homeless. We help families in crisis. We help mothers who are overwhelmed. If you are struggling with reality, if you are feeling paranoid, we have counselors who can come to your home. Today, I am not paranoid. I said, hearing voices is a symptom of deep burnout, he said softly. It is nothing to be ashamed of. But if it continues, if it affects your ability to maintain a safe environment, well, we just want to get ahead of it. Before it becomes a legal matter. A legal matter? We work closely with Child Protective Services. Alice, when a parent is unwell, sometimes the most loving thing we can do is offer a stabilization period, a few days away, just to reset. He was threatening me with my daughter. He was telling me that if I didn't stop, he would take Lily. How did you get my number? I asked. I am a community organizer. Alice, I make it my business to know our neighbors, especially the vulnerable ones. I am not vulnerable. I said, and I don't need your help. I hung up. I immediately blocked the number, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. Child Protective Services. I had to go to work. I had to pretend everything was normal. If I stayed home, I was the unstable woman hiding in her house. If I went to work, I was Alice, the reliable medical biller. I drove to Northbridge Claims Solutions. The office was a sterile expanse of gray cubicles and fluorescent lights. It was usually a place of boredom, but today it felt like a sanctuary. I sat at my desk and started processing claims. Code 99213. Code 88305. The numbers were comforting. They were logical. At 11 o'clock, my manager, Susan, appeared at my cubicle. She didn't have her usual coffee mug. She had a file folder. Alice, can you come to HR for a minute? She asked. My heart hammered. HR? Why? Just a quick chat. I followed her. The walk to the HR office felt like a walk to the gallows. The HR director, a woman named Linda who always wore too much perfume, was sitting behind her desk. She didn't smile. Have a seat. Alice, I sat. We received a complaint, Linda said. A complaint? From a client? No, Linda said, from an anonymous source, but it concerns your conduct. The complaint alleges that you have been behaving erratically, that you have been making unfounded accusations against city officials, and that you are creating an unsafe environment. I stared at her. My personal life is not work business, I said. It is when it impacts our reputation. Linda said, we contract with the city for employee benefits management. If our employees are harassing city inspectors, I didn't harass anyone, I said. I found a person trapped in my house. Linda exchanged a look with Susan. It was the same look Dana Klein had given me, the look Judith had given me. Alice, Linda said gently, we are concerned about you. You look exhausted. We think maybe you should take some time. Use your FMLA. Get some rest. You are firing me? We are placing you on administrative leave, pending a fitness for duty evaluation. I stood up. This is illegal, I said. Please, Alice, don't make a scene. It validates the complaint. I walked out. I walked past my cubicle, past the photos of Lily tacked to the fabric wall. I walked out of the building and into the bright, blinding sun. They had reached my job. In less than 24 hours, they had reached my job. I sat in my car and cried. For 5 minutes, I just cried. I felt small. I felt crushed. Then I wiped my face. I took out a notebook from my purse. I wrote, 1. The crying is real. Recorded on October 14th and October 15th. 2. The crawlspace tunnel exists. Verified by Devon Pike. 3. The permit 88B04 is fake. Verified at City Hall. 4. Rowan Fell knows details about my house he shouldn't know. 5. Nora is her name. I read the list. These were facts. They couldn't gaslight facts. My phone buzzed. It was Tessa. Meet me at the fire station on 4th. Bring the recording. I drove to the fire station. Tessa was standing by the bay doors with an older man. He had white hair and a face that looked like it was carved out of oak. This is Graham Yates, Tessa said. He was the fire inspector here for 30 years. Graham shook my hand. His grip was iron. Tessa played him the recording from the baby monitor. The not yet. The eat. Graham listened. His eyes closed. When it finished, he didn't look surprised. He looked sad. I have heard that voice before. He said, "Not the man." "The room? The room?" I asked. "The acoustics," he said. "Small box. No soft surfaces. That is a confinement cell. We used to find them in the 70s. In the old boarding houses. They called them quiet rooms." He looked at me. "You are asking why no one hears her crying?" he said. "Because the walls are thick?" I asked. "No," Graham said. "Because people are trained not to hear. When a baby cries, everyone looks. When a woman cries, people look away. It makes them uncomfortable. It feels private. Harborstone knows that. They count on it. They weaponize the awkwardness. If a neighbor hears a sob, they think domestic dispute or mental breakdown, and they close their windows. They don't think prisoner." He pointed a finger at me. "Rowan Fell isn't hiding her from the police. Alice, he is hiding her in plain sight. He relies on the social contract that says we don't interfere in other people's homes. So how do I break it?" I asked. "You have to make it impossible to ignore." Graham said, "You have to make the noise so loud that looking away makes them complicit." I went home. The house felt different now. It wasn't just scary. It was a crime scene. I made dinner. I forced myself to eat. Eat. Rowan had told Nora. Resilience. I needed resilience. I sat on the couch, my phone in my hand, waiting for 9 o'clock, waiting for the update from the trip. At 9:15, a notification popped up. Lily Henderson posted a new photo. I opened it, desperate for her face. The photo was a landscape shot, a sunset over the mountains. It was beautiful. The caption read, "Miss you, Mom. Having the best time. Don't worry about me." I stared at the photo. The sun was setting in the picture. But on the East Coast, the sun had set 3 hours ago, and Lily didn't use all caps, ever. She typed in lowercase, "Miss you, Mom," and the emoji. It was a red heart. Lily always used the blue heart. Always. It was our thing. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't Lily. Lily wasn't posting this. Someone had her phone, or someone had her account password. I looked at the timestamp. Posted 2 minutes ago. Lily should be in bed. The chaperone said no phones. They were posting for her. They were curating her digital life to keep me calm, to keep me from driving up that mountain and getting her. Don't worry about me. It was the same message Rowan had given me. The same message the school had given me. I stood up. The fear that had been paralyzing me for 3 days evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, white-hot rage. They could hide a woman in my basement. They could gaslight me about noises. They could take my job. But they had touched my daughter. They had put their hands on her identity. I looked at the floorboards. Not yet. The man had said, "No, now." I thought, I wasn't going to wait for the police. I wasn't going to wait for the permits. I was going to blow up their carefully curated image. And I was going to start by becoming the villain they were so afraid of. I grabbed the baby monitor, I grabbed my car keys, and then I grabbed the sledgehammer Elias had left behind in his panic. I walked to the basement door. I unlocked it. "I am coming. Nora," I whispered, "and God help anyone who tries to stop me." The Maple Hollow School District Administrative Office was a brick fortress of bureaucracy. Situated 2 miles from the high school, I parked my car in a visitor slot, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The image of the fake Instagram post, the red heart, the lowercase letters, the impossible sunset, was burned into my retinas. They had taken my daughter's voice, and now I was going to take it back. I walked into the reception area. It smelled of floor wax and indifference. A receptionist sat behind a high counter, typing with a rhythm that suggested she was paid by the keystroke. "Can I help you?" she asked without looking up. "I need to speak to the superintendent." I said, "My name is Alice Henderson. My daughter is on the junior class trip." She stopped typing and looked at me. Her eyes flicked to a list taped to her monitor. Do you have an appointment, Ms. Henderson? No. I have a daughter who is being impersonated on social media, and a chaperone who hangs up on me. I want to know where she is. Exact coordinates. Now. The receptionist didn't blink. She didn't look surprised. She looked like she had been briefed. One moment, she said. She picked up her phone and whispered something I couldn't hear. 2 minutes later, a heavy oak door opened, and a woman in a beige suit stepped out. She had the kind of smile that was practiced in a mirror, wide, showing teeth, but stopping dead at the eyes. Ms. Henderson? I am Vice Principal Litton. Why don't you come back to my office? I followed her. The office was plush, filled with certificates of excellence and photos of smiling. Diverse student bodies that looked like stock photography. Please, sit down, she said, gesturing to a low chair that would force me to look up at her. I remained standing. I want to speak to Lily. I said, Ms. Henderson, we understand you are feeling anxious, she said. The pause before the word anxious was deliberate. It was a diagnostic pause. I am not anxious. I said, I am angry. Someone accessed my daughter's account last night. They posted a photo from a time zone 3 hours behind us. They used a caption she would never write. Vice Principal Litton folded her hands on her desk. We looked into that. She said, the chaperones tell us that the girls often share devices. It is a bonding experience, and sometimes they use scheduling apps for their posts. It is very common. Do not lie to me, I said. My voice was low. The chaperone wouldn't let me speak to her. She said they were in a cave. They were, Litton said soothingly. The itinerary is very packed. We find that constant parental contact can actually increase homesickness. It disrupts the immersive nature of the educational experience. I leaned over her desk. If I do not hear her voice in the next hour, I am calling the state police. I am reporting a kidnapping. Litton sighed. It was a sound of professional patience wearing thin. Alice, she said, using my first name without permission. We are aware of the situation at your home. I froze. What situation? Mr. Fell from Harborstone Outreach contacted the district. She said, he expressed concern that you might be projecting your own difficulties onto your daughter's safety. We have been advised to keep Lily's environment stable. We don't want to upset her with drama from home. My blood ran cold. They had called the school. They had preempted me. So you are blocking my calls because a landlord told you I'm crazy? We are following protocol for a parent in crisis. Litton said, Lily is safe. She is happy. We have a duty of care to protect her from emotional volatility. She stood up. Go home. Ms. Henderson, get some rest. Lily will be back on Friday. If you continue to escalate this, we will have to involve the school resource officer, and nobody wants a scene on your permanent record. I looked at her. I saw the wall I was up against. It wasn't just a wall of silence. It was a wall of complicity. I will go. I said. I walked out. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a chair. I walked out with the steady, measured pace of a soldier leaving enemy territory. They thought they had neutralized me. They thought that by invoking protocol, they could make me retreat, but they didn't understand. They had just confirmed everything. Lily was the hostage, and my silence was the ransom. I drove home, taking the long way, checking my rearview mirror every 2 blocks, no white sedans, no vans. When I pulled onto my street, Devin was waiting for me. He was standing near my mailbox, pretending to inspect the azaleas. I pulled into the driveway and got out. What is it? I asked. He looked nervous. He was wearing sunglasses, even though it was overcast. I was here last night, he said quietly. After I left you, I parked down on Sycamore, just to watch. And? Around 3 a.m, a van pulled up. It didn't park in front of your house. It parked 2 streets over, on the parallel block, the one that backs up to your lot. A Harborstone van? It was unmarked, Devin said, white Ford Transit, but it had the heavy suspension, and when I walked toward it, the driver killed the engine. I pretended to be walking a dog. I didn't have a dog, but I had a leash in my pocket. As soon as I got close, he started it up and drove off. no headlights. He didn't turn them on until he was at the stop sign. He was watching the backyard. I said, "He was watching the lattice," Devin corrected. "He was watching the entrance." I looked at the house. It felt besieged. "They are checking to see if I found it." I said. Devin nodded. "And if they think you found it, Ms. Henderson, they aren't going to leave her there. They are going to move her." "I know." I said. I went inside and called Tessa. I used a burner phone she had given me at the fire station. "They are circling the wagons." I said, "The school is blocking me. There was a van watching the crawl space last night." "We need to move," Tessa said. Her voice was tinny on the cheap device. "I talked to Graham. He says if we go to the local police now, they will tip off code compliance. Dana Klein will get there first, slap a condemnation order on the door, and seal the scene before anyone can look inside. So what do? We go over their heads." Tessa said, "I have a contact at the county sheriff's office. Deputy Sheriff Miller. He hates the city administration. He has been trying to nail Rowan Fell for fraud for years, but he needs probable cause. He can't get a warrant based on weird noises. I will get him probable cause." I said, "How? You can't go in there. If you break the seal, Dana wins." "I am not going to break the seal." I said, "I am going to use the back door." "The lattice?" Alice. "If you go in that tunnel and run into the guy, I am not going in." I said, "But my eyes are—" I hung up. I waited until the street was empty. It was 2 p.m. The sun was high, which was good. Shadows were my enemy right now. I went to the garage and found what I was looking for: a fiberglass rod, the kind used for fishing wire through walls, and duct tape. I taped my smartphone to the end of the rod. I set it to video mode. I turned on the flash. I went out to the side of the house, moving casually, like I was checking the foundation for weeds. I reached the lattice panel Devin had shown me. I glanced around. No vans, no neighbors. I unhooked the latch. It swung open silently. The tunnel was dark. It smelled of earth and treated lumber. I didn't crawl in. I extended the rod. I pushed the phone into the darkness. 5 feet, 10 feet. The screen on my phone was too far away to see, but I could control the recording from my smartwatch. I watched the tiny screen on my wrist. The camera bumped along the plywood floor. The image was shaky, a blur of wood grain and darkness. Then, the tunnel ended. On the watch screen, I saw a small door. It was painted black. It was slightly ajar. I pushed the rod further. The phone nudged the door open. The camera slid into the room. I held my breath. The video feed stabilized. It was a room, not a crawl space. A room. The floor was covered in a cheap remnant of carpet. The walls were lined with soundproofing foam. The gray, egg crate kind. In the corner, there was a cot. A military-style folding cot with a gray wool blanket. Next to it was a 5-gallon water jug with a pump, a bucket with a lid, a stack of protein bars, and a ventilation hose, thick and silver, snaking down from the ceiling like a futuristic python. The camera panned as I twisted the rod. In the corner, curled up on the rug, was a figure. She was wearing gray sweatpants and a sweatshirt. Her hair was matted. She was rocking back and forth. My heart hammered against my ribs. I needed her face. I needed to prove she was real. I twisted the rod again. The phone scraped against the floor. The figure froze. She lifted her head. I saw her. She looked to be about 30. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow and ringed with dark circles. She looked terrified. She stared right at the lens. The light from the phone's flash blinded her for a second. She put a hand up, then she whispered, "Please." Her voice came through the phone's speaker, tinny but audible. "Please don't hurt me. I ate the food." I did what he said. I spoke toward the tunnel opening, keeping my voice low but projecting it down the plywood chute. "Nora?" On the screen. I saw her jolt. She looked around, confused. The voice wasn't coming from the room. It was coming from the tunnel. "Nora, listen to me. My name is Alice. I am the woman upstairs." She scrambled backward, pressing herself against the foam wall. "No," she whispered. "No. He said you are one of them. He said you are the Watcher. I am not a watcher. I said, I am a mother. I know you are down there. I am going to get you out. She shook her head frantically. You can't. He has the papers. He says if I leave, the police will take me to the chaotic ward. He says I hurt someone. You didn't hurt anyone. Nora, he is lying to you. He says I am non-compliant. She sobbed. It was a dry, heaving sound. He says the paperwork takes time. I have been here. I don't know how long. Nora, look at the light. I said, look at the camera. She looked at the phone. I am recording this. I said, I am going to show this to the sheriff. The real sheriff. Not the city police. Her eyes went wide. Not the city, she hissed. Dana talks to him. I heard them. She stood right outside the door and told him the ventilation was up to code. Dana Klein? The lady with the clipboard. She knows. Rage, hot and pure, flooded my veins. Dana Klein hadn't just ignored a permit violation. She had inspected a cell. Nora, I whispered, I have to pull the camera back. I have to send this video to the good police, but I am not leaving you. I am right upstairs. Don't leave, she begged. Please, it gets so dark. I promise. I said, I am coming back. I pulled the rod. They will make you the problem. She whispered, that is what he says. He says everyone who fights him becomes the problem. I pulled the phone out of the tunnel and latched the lattice. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely tap the screen. I stopped the recording. I hit send. I sent it to Tessa. I sent it to Marissa. I uploaded it to a cloud drive I had created 10 minutes ago. Then I dialed the number Tessa had given me. Sheriff's Department. Deputy Miller. This is Alice Henderson. I said, I have visual confirmation of a kidnapping victim at 412 Elm Street. I have footage of the victim identifying her captor and a city official as an accomplice. I'm sending you the file now. There was a silence on the other end. Then the sound of a chair scraping back. Send it, Miller said, and lock your doors. Ms. Henderson, I am 40 minutes out. 40 minutes. I went back inside. I locked the deadbolt. I pushed the heavy armchair in front of the door. I sat in the hallway, the sledgehammer across my lap. I waited. 10 minutes passed. Then, a car pulled into the driveway. I stood up, gripping the handle of the hammer. Was it Miller? He said 40 minutes. I looked through the peephole. It wasn't a sheriff's cruiser. It was the white city sedan. Dana Klein. She walked up the path. She wasn't alone this time. There were 2 men with her. They wore gray jumpsuits with city facilities stenciled on the back. They carried heavy tool bags. She knocked. 3 sharp raps. Ms. Henderson? This is Officer Klein. Open the door. I didn't answer. Ms. Henderson, we know you are home. We saw you in the yard. I stayed silent. Alice? She called out, her voice taking on that fake, reasonable tone. I have an emergency remediation order. We believe the structural integrity of your foundation is compromised. The gas line may be at risk. I need you to vacate the property immediately for your own safety. For your own safety. She slid a piece of paper under the door. I looked at it. It was a bright red sheet. Emergency vacate order. Unsafe structure. Occupants must relocate within 1 hour. It was the leverage. They wanted me out. If I left, the men in the gray jumpsuits would go down to the basement. They would patch the wall. They would drug Nora and drag her out through the tunnel. And when the sheriff arrived, the room would be empty. Just a storage closet with some old boxes. And I would look like a lunatic who wasted police resources. I yelled through the door. I am not leaving. Dana. Ms. Henderson. Failure to comply with a safety order is a misdemeanor. These men are here to secure the gas line. If you don't open the door, we will have to call the police to assist with the evacuation. Call them, I screamed. Call the police. I wanted her to call the local police. I wanted them to show up when Miller got here. I wanted a jurisdiction war on my front lawn. Dana didn't like that answer. I heard her step back. Check the back, she murmured to one of the men. I heard heavy boots crunching on the gravel. Heading toward the rear of the house, I ran to the kitchen. I checked the back door. Locked. I checked the window locks. I was trapped in my own fortress. My phone buzzed. It was Marissa. I am coming. I am bringing Graham. Hold tight. I went back to the hallway. Dana was still on the porch. I could hear her talking on the radio. Dispatch. We have a non-compliant resident at the hazard site, requesting backup for extraction. She was calling in the cavalry. I looked at the time. Miller was still 30 minutes away. I needed to stall. I opened the door just as far as the chain lock would allow. Dana looked at me through the crack. Her eyes were cold. Dead things. Ms. Henderson, she said, you are making a mistake. This is for your protection. My protection? I asked. Or hers? Dana didn't blink. I don't know what you think you found, Alice, but stress can make us see things that aren't there. If you come out now, we can get you help. We can get you a hotel voucher. A nice one. By the lake. You inspected that room. Dana. I said, she told me. Dana's face didn't change, but her posture did. She stiffened. There is no room. Alice, it is a crawl space. You are hysterical. Now open this door before my guys take it off the hinges. I slammed the door and locked it. I backed away. I went to the living room window. I saw the second man in the gray jumpsuit standing by the hydrangeas. He was looking at the lattice panel. He reached for it. Hey, I shouted through the glass. Get away from there. He looked up, startled. He saw me filming him. He backed off, raising his hands. They knew they were exposed. They were getting sloppy. 10 minutes later, Marissa's car screeched into the driveway, blocking the city sedan. She jumped out, followed by Graham Yates. Graham was wearing his old fire inspector jacket. It looked official enough to make Dana pause. Graham marched up the path. Officer Klein, he barked. Dana turned. She looked annoyed. Mr. Yates, this is a restricted site. On whose authority? Graham asked. I don't see a structural engineer's stamp on that vacate order. I just see a signature from a zoning clerk. I have deemed it hazardous, Dana said, and I am deeming it a crime scene, Graham said. He stood between her and the door. You are not entering this property until the county sheriff arrives. Dana's eyes narrowed. You have no jurisdiction here. Old man, maybe not, Graham said, but I have a lot of friends in the press, and that lady in the car is taking pictures of your license plate. He pointed to Marissa, who was holding her phone up like a weapon. Dana hesitated. She looked at her two goons. She looked at the street. She knew the clock was ticking. Fine, she spat. We will wait for the police. She walked back to her car and sat inside. She didn't drive away. She just sat there, waiting. Marissa ran to the door. I let her in. She hugged me. She felt solid, real. Did you send it? She asked. Yes, Miller is coming. We sat in the living room, watching Dana's car. The standoff had begun. Night began to fall. The shadows lengthened. The sheriff hadn't arrived. Where is he? I asked. It has been an hour. Traffic on the connector is bad, Graham said from the porch. He was standing guard. Or maybe he's getting a warrant signed. Judges take time. I looked at the floorboards. It was 7 o'clock. At 7:15. The sound started. The crying. It was louder tonight. Nora knew we were here. She knew the battle was happening above her head. Then, the monitor crackled. Click. The man's voice. She is stubborn, he whispered. She called outside. He sounded angry, controlled, but angry. Please. Nora wept. She saw me. She promised. She promised nothing. The man said, she is just like the rest. She wants to be the hero. But heroes get people hurt. I grabbed the monitor. I can hear you, I shouted at the plastic speaker. The sheriff is coming. There was a silence. Then, the man spoke. Not to Nora, to the air, to the bug he knew was there. If she opens it, he said, his voice ice cold. We relocate. No, Nora screamed. No, please, not the van. Quiet, he commanded. Pack your things. We are leaving. I looked at Marissa. We relocate. That meant they were going to move her now, right now. But how? The house was surrounded. Graham was on the porch. Dana was in the driveway. Unless... Graham came back inside. He looked pale. Alice? He said. What? I just remembered something. About the previous owner, the one who filed the fake permit. Who was it? His name was Silas Vance. He was a contractor for the city, but before that what? Before that, he worked for the water department, Graham said. He was a tunnel engineer. My stomach dropped. Tunnel engineer. I looked at the basement door. Graham, I said, where do the storm drains run on this street? He looked at me, realizing what I was asking. They run deep, he said, below the foundation line, to handle the runoff from the hill. The crawl space tunnel. The one Devon found. It wasn't just an entry from the yard. It was a connector. They aren't taking her out to a van. I whispered. Marissa gasped. They are taking her out through the storm drain. They were going to drag her underground. They were going to disappear her into the veins of the city. Right under the sheriff's feet, I grabbed the sledgehammer. I am not waiting for the warrant, I said. Alice, Graham warned. I walked to the basement door. I kicked the table away. I unlocked the door. I turned on the light. If I open the wall, I break the seal. If I break the seal, Dana condemns the house. I didn't care. Let her condemn it, I said. I marched down the stairs. The air was cold. The smell of fear was thick. I stood in front of the sealed alcove. The taped-over hole stared at me like a cyclops eye. I raised the hammer. Alice! Marissa screamed from the top of the stairs. I swung. Crack! The drywall shattered. Dust exploded into the air. I swung again. Crack! A hole opened up, big enough to see through. I looked inside. The cot was overturned. The water jug was on its side, spilling onto the carpet, and in the back of the room, a section of the floor had been pulled up. A trapdoor. It was open. Dark. Rushing air came up from it. The sound of rushing water. Nora! I screamed. I heard a scream back, faint, echoing, coming from deep below the earth. Alice. They were in the tunnels. I turned to Graham, who was standing on the stairs, staring at the hole. Get the sheriff, I said. Tell him to bring the map of the storm drains. I gripped the hammer. I am going down. I stood in the cloud of drywall dust, the sledgehammer heavy in my hands, staring down into the black abyss of the open trapdoor. The sound of rushing water echoed from deep below. The storm drains, the veins of the city where they had planned to wash Nora away like unwanted debris. I placed my boot on the first rung of the ladder leading down. Alice! Graham shouted from the top of the stairs. Stop! I didn't look back. I gripped the cold iron of the ladder. Alice, look at the driveway. I hesitated. Through the high basement windows, I saw it, not just the flashing yellow of the city sedan, but blue, sharp, piercing blue lights cutting through the twilight. A siren chirped, short, authoritative. I stepped back from the hole. I lowered the hammer. Sheriff Miller had arrived. I climbed back up the stairs, my legs trembling now that the adrenaline of the swing was fading. When I emerged into the hallway, the front door was open. Graham was holding it wide. Deputy Sheriff Miller filled the doorway. He was a broad man with a face that looked like it had been chiseled from granite and then weathered by 20 years of seeing the worst people do the worst things. Behind him were 3 deputies, their hands resting on their holsters, but behind them, parked at a sharp angle on the lawn, were 2 cruisers from the Maple Hollow Police Department. The local officers were standing by their cars, talking on their radios, looking at the sheriff's deputies with open hostility. It was a jurisdiction war, playing out in silence on my front lawn. Ms. Henderson? Miller asked. He didn't look at the hammer in my hand. He looked at my eyes. It is in the basement, I said. I breached the wall. There is a trapdoor. It leads to the storm drains. Miller nodded. He signaled to his deputies, secure the perimeter. No one enters or leaves. Officer Dana Klein pushed past the local cops, waving her clipboard. Sheriff, she shouted, you cannot enter that basement. I have issued a red tag order. That structure is unstable and contains hazardous particulate matter. You are endangering your men. Miller stopped. He turned slowly to look at her. And who are you? I am Officer Klein, Code Compliance. I have authority over this structure. Miller stepped closer to her. He towered over her by a foot. Ma'am, I am executing a search warrant signed by a superior court judge regarding a Class A felony kidnapping. Unless you want to be charged with obstruction of justice, you will take your clipboard and stand behind the yellow tape." Dana opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at the local police officers, waiting for them to intervene. They shifted their weight, looking at the ground. They weren't going to fight the county sheriff. Not for her. Miller turned back to me. "Show me." I led them down. The deputies moved with tactical precision, sweeping the room with lights that made my flashlight look like a toy. When they saw the hole in the wall, the overturned cot, and the open trap door, the atmosphere in the room shifted from investigative to urgent. "She is down there," I whispered. One of the deputies, a woman with a calm face, knelt by the trap door. "Sheriff, I have fresh drag marks in the dust," she said. "Going down, go," Miller commanded. "2 men, containment only. Do not engage if there is a weapon." The deputies descended. I stood by the washing machine, hugging myself. The silence stretched. 10 seconds. 20. Then, a voice from the hall upstairs. Smooth, cultured, unbothered. "Sheriff Miller, is there a problem?" I froze. Rowan Fell walked down the basement stairs. He was wearing a cashmere sweater and dark jeans. He looked like he had just come from a wine tasting. He didn't look like a man whose dungeon had just been raided. He looked like a concerned neighbor. Graham tried to block him at the bottom of the stairs, but Rowan sidestepped him with a polite smile. "Mr. Fell," Miller said, "I didn't invite you in. I saw the lights." Rowan said, "I was just having dinner nearby. As the director of Harborstone, and given that my organization has assisted the city with difficult transitions, I thought I might be of service." He looked at the hole in the wall. He looked at the trap door. He didn't flinch. He adjusted his glasses. "Oh, dear," he said. "It seems Ms. Henderson has caused quite a bit of damage." He turned to Miller, his voice dropping into a confidential register. "Sheriff, I think there has been a terrible misunderstanding. We have been working with a client, a very fragile woman, who requested a safe, sensory-deprived environment. It is a consensual arrangement, a therapy pod, essentially. We were in the process of transferring her to a permanent facility when Ms. Henderson, when she began her crusade." He gestured at me. "Alice has been under a lot of strain." Rowan said gently, "We have been worried about her. I believe she has misinterpreted a standard housing transition as something sinister." It was masterful. In 3 sentences, he had framed the dungeon as a clinic and me as a hysteric. Miller looked at Rowan. Then he looked at me. "Ms. Henderson?" Miller asked. I didn't scream. I didn't attack him. I remembered what Graham had said. Make it impossible to ignore. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I had the baby monitor recording queued up. I didn't say a word. I just pressed play. Max volume. The sound filled the basement. If she opens it, we relocate. Rowan's smile faltered. Just a fraction, a tightening at the corner of his eye. I let it play. "No, not the van. Quiet. Pack your things." I stopped the recording. I looked at Rowan. "Since when does a therapy patient beg not to be relocated to a van?" "Rowan?" I asked. My voice was steady, cold. "And since when does a therapist use a trapdoor into a sewer to move a client?" Rowan opened his mouth to speak, probably to talk about unconventional exit strategies, but he was cut off. "Got her!" a deputy shouted from the hole. There was a scuffle below, the sound of boots on metal. "Coming up!" We all turned to the hole. First, the deputy emerged. Then, he reached down and pulled. Nora Ellison came up into the light. She was covered in grime. Her sweatpants were torn at the knees. Her skin was the color of old paper, gray and translucent. She was blinking rapidly. Her hands held up in front of her face as if to ward off a blow. She wasn't bound. There were no ropes, no handcuffs, but the way she cowered, pressing her back against the deputy's legs, showed a bondage stronger than chain. "Nora?" I whispered. She looked at me, then she looked at Rowan. She let out a sound that wasn't a scream. It was a whimper of pure, distilled terror. I didn't tell, she cried out, looking at Rowan. I didn't tell her. I was quiet. Please don't send me to the bad place. Rowan took a step forward, his hands raised in a calming gesture. Nora, it is okay, he said smoothly. These officers are just confused. We are going to get you back to the center. Step back, Miller barked. He put a hand on his holster. Nora collapsed. She slid down the wall, curling into a ball on the concrete floor. He has the papers. She sobbed into her knees. He said I am non-compliant. He said if I leave, I go to jail. I don't want to go to jail. I knelt beside her. I didn't touch her. I just put my body between her and Rowan. You are not going to jail. Nora, I said, you are the victim. She shook her head. I signed the paper. She wept. I signed the lease. He said it was a safe space, but he locked the door, and then he told me. He told me the air outside was bad. He told me the neighbors would call the police on me. She looked up at me, her eyes streaming. Was I crying too loud? She asked. Is that why they came? No. Nora, I said, you were crying just loud enough. Miller turned to Rowan. The sheriff's face was hard. Consensual? Miller asked. Rowan adjusted his cuffs. He was sweating now. I could see the sheen on his forehead. She is a troubled woman. Sheriff, she suffers from paranoid delusions. We were managing her condition. The lock was for her own safety, to prevent wandering. And the storm drain? Miller asked. Was that for her safety too? Emergency egress. Rowan said. In case of fire, it is all in the building code. You mean the code Dana Klein approved? I asked. Dana had come down the stairs. She was standing at the back, trying to look invisible. Miller looked at Dana. You approved a storm drain as a residential exit? Dana's face was gray. I would have to check the file. She stammered. I don't recall the specifics of this property. Tessa Ward stepped out from the shadows of the laundry nook. She was holding her phone. The red light of the recording app glowing steady in the dim room. I have it on video, Tessa said. Part 4. You told Alice there was no room. You told her it was a crawl space, but 10 minutes ago, you tried to stop the sheriff from entering because of hazardous materials in the room you said didn't exist. Tessa smiled. It was a shark smile. Which is it? Officer Klein? Is it a crawl space? Or is it a hazard? Because it can't be both. Dana looked at the phone, then at Miller. She stopped talking. She knew she was done. Rowan, however, was not done. Sheriff, he said, his voice hardening, this is a matter for the city attorney. Harborstone has a contract with the municipality. If you arrest me, you are disrupting a vital city service. I suggest we discuss this at the station, with legal counsel present. He was betting on the system. He was betting that the sheriff wouldn't want the political headache of cuffing a major city contractor in a basement. Miller looked at Nora, who was still shivering on the floor. He looked at the tunnel. He pulled his handcuffs from his belt. You are right, Miller said. We will discuss it at the station. He walked over to Rowan. Turn around. Rowan's eyes went wide. For the first time, the mask slipped. He looked indignant. You are making a mistake. Miller, he hissed. Do you know who sits on my board? I don't care if the Pope sits on your board. Miller said, you are under arrest for kidnapping, false imprisonment, and endangerment. He clicked the cuffs on. Alice watched. It felt slow. It felt heavy. It wasn't the cheering moment from a movie. It was just a man in a sweater getting cuffed next to a water heater. But it was real. Suddenly, my pocket vibrated. My phone. I pulled it out. It was a call from Mrs. Vickers, trip chaperone. My heart hammered. I answered. Hello? Mrs. Henderson. Mrs. Vickers sounded panicked. Her voice was an octave higher than usual. We just had a disturbing call. What happened? I asked. The basement faded away. All I could see was Lily's face in my mind. Someone called the lodge. She said, a man. He identified himself as Dr. Aris from the Maple Hollow Crisis Center. He said you had suffered a psychotic break. I gripped the phone. Go on. He said you were armed and dangerous, and that you might be coming for Lily. He sent a fax, a signed order, requesting that Lily be placed in protective custody immediately. He wanted us to hand her over to a transport team that was on the way. My knees almost gave out. This was the endgame. If they couldn't stop me. They were going to steal her. They were going to put her in the system, buried under emergency protection orders, just like they buried Nora. "Where is she?" I demanded. "Did you give her to them?" "No," Mrs. Vickers said. "We called the police to verify, but the man on the phone got aggressive. He said we were endangering the child. I am calling you to—" "Alice, are you okay?" "I am fine," I said. My voice was shaking, but it was fierce. "Mrs. Vickers, listen to me. I am standing with the county sheriff. I am sane. I am safe." That call was a lie. It was a trick to get to her. I need to speak to her. "Mrs. Vickers, put her on." "But the protocol." "Put her on," I screamed. There was a fumble, a muffled sound. "Mom?" It was Lily. Her voice was small, scared. "Lily," I said. I closed my eyes. Tears leaked out, hot and fast. "Mom, what is happening?" "Mrs. Vickers is crying. She said someone is coming to take me." "No one is taking you, baby. No one." I looked at Sheriff Miller. I held the phone out to him. "Tell her," I said. Miller leaned down to the phone. "Lily, this is Sheriff Miller. I am with your mom. She is perfectly fine. She is safe, and you are safe. Do not get in any car unless it is a marked police vehicle. Do you understand?" "Yes," Lily whispered. Miller looked at me. "We are going to send a patrol unit from the local jurisdiction up there to sit with the bus until they come home." He said to the phone, "You are okay." "Kid," I took the phone back. "Lily," I said, "I love you. I will be there when the bus pulls in. I promise. I love you too." "Mom." I hung up. I looked at Rowan Fell. He was standing by the stairs, his hands cuffed behind his back. He had heard the call. He knew his fail-safe had failed. "You monster," I whispered. Rowan looked at me. His expression was unreadable. It wasn't fear, it was calculation. "This isn't over." "Alice," he said quietly, "you think one arrest stops the machine? The city needs us. The city needs places to put the broken things. You just broke the one lid we had." Miller shoved him forward. "Move," he said. They marched him up the stairs. The deputies helped Nora up. She was too weak to walk. They carried her, creating a chair with their arms. As they passed me, she reached out a dirty hand and touched my sleeve. "Thank you," she whispered. "You heard me." I watched them go. Dana Klein was the last to leave. A deputy was escorting her. She wasn't in cuffs, not yet. But she had been read her rights. She wouldn't look at me. She stared straight ahead, clutching her clipboard like a life preserver that had already deflated. The basement emptied out. Graham Yates stood at the bottom of the stairs. He looked at the hole in the wall. He looked at the tunnel. "You did it, kid," he said. I looked at the mess, the shattered drywall, the exposed secrets. I didn't feel like I had won. I felt like I had survived a shipwreck. "They aren't going to keep him, are they?" I asked. Graham sighed. He took a toothpick out of his pocket and chewed on it. "They will keep him tonight," he said. "But tomorrow, the lawyers will come. They will argue that the trapdoor was a historic feature. They will argue that Nora signed a contract. They will bury the sheriff in paper. Rowan has friends in high places. So it was for nothing? No." Graham said, he pointed to the ceiling, to the house above us. "You saved the girl in the basement, and you saved the girl on the mountain. That isn't nothing." He walked up the stairs. I stayed down there for a moment longer. I walked over to the cot. I saw the stack of protein bars. I saw a book lying on the pillow. It was a children's book, The Runaway Bunny, psychological torture, infantilizing her, making her feel small so she wouldn't fight back. I picked up the book. I thought about the unstable mom narrative they had tried to spin around me, how close it had come to working. If I hadn't had Devon, if I hadn't had Tessa, if I hadn't broken the wall, I would be the one in a room like this. Or Lily would be. I shivered. I walked to the hole in the wall. The cold air from the storm drain was still blowing in. It smelled of rain and rot. I grabbed the roll of duct tape from the floor. the same tape I had used to silence the hole 2 days ago. I taped the children's book to the wall, right next to the jagged opening, a marker, a monument. Then I turned off the light. I walked up the stairs and locked the door. Outside, the flashing lights were dying down. The sheriff's cruiser pulled away with Rowan in the back. The ambulance carrying Nora turned the corner, its siren wailing a low, mournful song. Tessa was standing in the driveway, typing furiously on her phone. "Front page?" I asked. "Special edition." She said, "I am uploading the video now. By morning, everyone in Maple Hollow will know what code compliance really means." I looked at the house, my sensible craftsman bungalow, my fortress. It looked different now. It looked scarred. But it was mine. I went inside. I locked the front door. I checked the back door. I went into the kitchen and made a cup of tea. My hands were finally steady. I sat at the table and looked at the empty chair where Lily usually sat. She would be home on Friday. I would have to explain everything. I would have to tell her that the world was scarier than we thought, that the monsters weren't under the bed. They were in the zoning office and the charity board. But I would also tell her that we beat them. I took a sip of tea. I heard a noise. Creak. It was the house settling, just the wood cooling in the night air. I didn't flinch. I knew every sound this house made now. I knew its language. And I knew that, for the first time in 3 years, the silence beneath the floorboards was real. Thank you for listening to I Hear Crying from your basement. This story was a journey into the quiet, bureaucratic horror that can hide in the most manicured suburbs. It's a reminder that sometimes the scariest things aren't ghosts, but the people who smile and offer to help. I would love to hear your thoughts on Alice's fight. Do you think Rowan Fell will stay in prison? Or will his connections get him out? And where are you listening from today? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more ordinary people taking down corrupt systems, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss a part. Stay safe, trust your gut, and always check your inspection reports. Until next time.